When the weather gets really cold, it's time to think about water in the pipes inside your home. With some advice on how to prevent freezing and flooding is our guest from the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, the communications coordinator, Stephen Mulloney. Thank you very much for being with us, Stephen.
Chris, thanks for having me and Boston Water and Sewer on again. It's always a pleasure to get our message out to your audience. Appreciate it.
First of all, for people who have not lived through this, when the pipes freeze, they burst, and there's a flood, how bad is this?
It can be bad. It can be costly. Obviously, at the minimum, it's an inconvenience. It can do damage to your home, your furnishings. So we have some tips to avoid that. But before we talk about tips, Chris, on how to prevent your pipes from freezing, can we just remind folks that if your pipes freeze, and we're going to talk about how to prevent that, do not, we urge you, use an open flame to try and thaw it out. It's just too dangerous. There are other ways, safer ways we'll talk about to thaw your pipes out if they freeze, but please, no open flames.
Well, one thing I still remember from high school science is that when the temperature goes down, if you got water in a pipe, when it turns to ice, it gets bigger. At least around that time, it gets bigger.
Yes, it's, I think, a fact of physics, which I did poorly in, but I have observed that myself.
So the way you prevent that is you got to keep the pipes warm enough. And I guess for people who have a cellar where it can get pretty cold, you might be warm upstairs, but you got to watch what goes down the cellar.
That's right. Well, we ask people to remind themselves of three things: locate, insulate, and circulate. What do we mean by locate? First of all, find your water main valve shutoff, usually in the cellar, usually by the water meter. And oh, by the way, now you've located your water meter. Why is that important? Well, if there is a flood, you can shut that water off quickly, and that will help prevent and minimize any damage. Also, it's a good idea just to know where your water meter is. Make sure there are no drafts if it's in the cellar. If the water meter freezes up, we have had instances where actually it has prevented people from getting water service. It's not likely, but it's a good idea to locate both the water main valve shutoff and the meter. Insulate, okay. Yes, you're right. A lot of our pipes are in unheated areas, basements, garages, crawl spaces. You probably should insulate starting in a warmer time, but our short tips are to go to the hardware store. You can buy inexpensive insulation materials like foam rubber. You know, wrap the pipes, keep those warm, and also it will not only prevent freezing, but it will also keep that water that's coming into your tap or your shower warmer as well.
Now, I imagine, yes, if you brought a space heater down to the basement, it would get warmer, but that's a dangerous way to go about it. So is there anything else people can do?
Well, as far as we talk about locate, insulate, we also talk about circulate. You mentioned, yeah, is the kitchen warm? Sure. Oftentimes pipes, I know in my house, one of the pipes for the bathroom and the kitchen runs behind the cabinets. Keep the cabinet doors open, circulate warm air. The kitchen's warm. That will help keep those pipes warm as well. Also, we talk about circulating water. We were just speaking with your producer. You run a small trickle. It'll help keep the pipes from freezing. The benefits far outweigh the costs, and it's not really, in this instance, a waste of water.
By the way, if people do have a problem and they need some help, is there anybody at the Water and Sewer Commission who could help them in any way?
We like to emphasize, Chris, that we are a 24-hour emergency agency, given the nature of what we do. And yes, well, first of all, let me say, let's say that your pipes are frozen, you're not getting the flow that you usually get and expect. There may be some water in some of the taps, so check that out first. You may have some supply. However, if you're convinced you have no water service, that your pipes are frozen, you can call Boston Water and Sewer. We have a 24-hour emergency assistance line, 617 989-7000.
Because another thing people might also have to keep an eye on is the water outside their house, where you have the garden hose hooked up. What should people be doing about that?
Well, first of all, if you have your garden hose still attached to your faucet, you're asking for trouble. I would immediately run out and detach that. Again, that can just cause a lot of problems in the water line. And so that's one of our recommendations. Thank you for reminding me.
And another idea to keep the house a bit warmer, open some cabinets, some doors, make sure that heat spreads around a bit more then, right?
That's right, exactly.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris, for having us as always.
Stephen Mulloney from the Boston Water and Sewer Commission. In a moment, the neighborhood versus the airport. We'll hear about a new documentary on decades of conflict in East Boston. But first, this message.